You knew this day would come. Activists claim that parents are an oppressive class that enforce patriarchy and bigotry on unsuspecting children who are in reality property of the state. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start with crazy things people say for 500, Alex, as radical leftists claim parents are an oppressive class just like rich people and heterosexuals. Yes, you heard that correctly. Rich people now are oppressive, heterosexuals are oppressive, and now parents. To be a mom and dad in this country is to perpetrate patriarchy, to enforce oppressive class values, to reduce children to prisoners who are confined to solitary confinement in their own homes, routinely beaten and prohibited from being who they are. So again, I think if you think about yesterday's show, Mom and Dad, where we laid out what's going on in the trans movement, and you look at this story today here, the war on the family has never been more viciously fought from the left perspective, and they've got everything. They've got all their ducks lined up now. They've got. We saw yesterday how in Washington State, you're this close to having no parental right to see your own kid's medical history.
This is all according to writer and editor Noah Berlatsky, who, by the way, is the editor of the comics and culture blog, The Hooded Utilitarian. Well, good old Noah. He decided, you know what? Parents, they're just not woke. They're not hip. They are oppressive. He called on Twitter parents an oppressive class. Actually, you know what? Parents are tyrants. Parent, in quotes, is an oppressive class, like rich people or white people, says the white man. He added, of course, that there are things you can do to try to minimize the abuse that's endemic to the parent-child relationship, but it's always there. It's always there. He also added that the oppressive parent class is emblematic of the patriarchy, and it reinforces a hierarchical, sexist society. All right, so did he tick all his boxes? We got sexism, hierarchies, patriarchy, oppressive parents, white people, rich people, we got that. Yeah, I think we hit all of our boxes on there.
Yeah, and so what you have here is a situation where there's no evidence for any of this. All of this because parents don't specifically try to raise their kids gay, or parents don't go out of their way to trans their kids. Pretty much what's happening here is that the progressive left is angry because parents aren't just going against biology, going against responsibility, going against the idea that they have a moral and an ethical obligation to teach kids about truth, to teach them about what is right and wrong, to provide moral base, oftentimes a religious Christian base to these kids. All of these things are terribly, terribly oppressive. But here's the irony. If they were doing the opposite, if they were teaching Satanism as opposed to Christianity, if they were proposing atheism instead of belief, if they were teaching children, the parents collectively, that gender is absolutely a social construct, if all the parents of America were giving 4-year-olds and 6-year-olds and 8-year-olds puberty blocking hormones until the kid was old enough to choose his own gender, all of that patriarchy would go, all of that racism would go. If you're doing to the children the kind of indoctrination the left wants, that's good, wholesome interaction. If you are a traditional parent who wants to see your kid grow up healthy and make his or her own choices, when they are old enough to do so rationally, well, then you're an oppressor.
And the thing is, people saw his comments and they're like, are you saying like by having my kid do some chores, or the fact that we have some house rules so that we can all like agree on what's happening and how to go about our day? They're like, are you saying that's oppressive? Because that's like a bridge too far for some of these people. And he responded back kind of confusedly as well. He said, asking people in your home to contribute to upkeep is fine, but sentencing them to solitary confinement if they don't cater to your whims or preferences is less okay, as if hitting them. The fact that capitalism is awful is not an excuse for abusive familial relationships. It's like, where did this come from?
And the more you read his explanation, the more you find out he really doesn't like capitalism. That's
it
the
is.
real problem here. And I said this, must be 20 years ago. I said this to a class of freshmen when I was teaching at Purdue University. 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago, that look what's coming, right? 20 years ago, we made it absolutely impossible to discipline your kid with corporal punishment, right? Even the most benign form of spanking, a swat on a butt, is now tantamount to physical abuse. How long, I said then, going down this track, will grounding your kids be seen as
Abuse
a horrible,
and, yeah.
right? I mean, because we all know emotional torment is much worse than physical, right?
True.
So maybe we got to go back to the old days where we just spanked them, because now yelling at kids or grounding kids or holding kids responsible, giving kids extra chores if they're in trouble, that's a greater emotional burden than if you just spanked them.
Yeah, and what basically Berlatsky is saying, it is like the traditional upbringing of your children, anything traditional is really what he finds any sort of
And
like.
by traditional, he
grip
doesn't
with.
mean faith family, he means capitalist systems, right?
Well, he does mean religious as well. I mean,
Well, the Marxists go after Christianity, don't they? Religion.
So basically, socialism is the solution.
That's
That's
right.
what obviously he's getting to. He says, do people just not know how kids are treated? Parents routinely prevent children from speaking to friends, leaving the house, identifying as queer. There it is.
There you go.
Parents regularly hit kids and emotionally abuse them. The mechanics of the family and of capitalism are not separable. So he's making a big leap of faith.
Of disfaith,
Of disfaith.
unfaith. A big faithless leap.
From over here where you have to clean your room to abuse, complete abuse. Just capitalism is awful. Like it makes absolutely no sense.
Well, don't forget that under socialist systems, the children were wards of the state.
It's
The
true.
parents really weren't parents in meaningful ways. They could not control their kids' health care. They were not able to contract with private doctors if they had money. They were not able to, teach kids pedagogy or learning strategies that run foul of the socialist Marxist dialectic. So this is what he's done is what he's basically doing is he's looking at childhood and parenting from the perspective of radical communists.
And what's interesting is the next comment he made too is actually like, take a look in the mirror, because this is exactly what your side likes to do. He said, if someone had the right to beat you unconscious, Black Lives Matter, imprison you for using a cell phone, no free speech, prevent you from going to college, prevent you from seeing friends, you'd see that as tyrannical, even if they didn't do any of those things, and rightly so. What are we living in right now in 2020? All of these things. And who's the oppressive class here? It's not the parents. It's the government.
Who wants to tell parents they have no right to see their kids' medical care? Who wants to tell parents that they have no right that every child will be on puberty blockers
government.
until they're a government? Exactly right. What is being used to implement all these change? And America, you just voted for it, right? Hope and change, Joe Biden style. Look what you're about to unleash on the American people. Who do you think is going to take over the Department of Education? People who think like Mr. What's his name?
Berlatsky.
Do you think that the new Secretary of Education will be sympathetic to what Berlatsky says? I'm pretty sure he will. What the craziness is going on in Washington State about trying to pass a bill that will not require children's medical files to be seen by the parents. Do you think they're going to put somebody in charge of Health and Human Services who's more or less sympathetic to Berlatsky? I would say more. Congratulations, you got rid of Trump, and now one of the major consequences of this for you is you're going to lose much, if not all, of control of your kids in the next 4 years.
From sea to shining sea, we have 3 superintendents of schools from the largest school districts who decided, you know what, we're going to band together and we're going to write an opinion piece for the Washington Post in which we make the claim that we actually need a Marshall Plan for our schools. Now,
is this a Marshall Mathers plan like M&M? Or is this
8 Mile? Let's do this.
Or is this the old World War II thing that nobody remembers?
World War II thing.
gosh.
So, yeah,
History.
the Marshall Plan history, turn it off for a moment. But for anyone who actually cares, the Marshall Plan was passed after World War II, and it was to help out those European neighbors who basically...
And Japanese.
Oh, yes. Who got demolished. And so we had to help them just kind of, rebuild. And it was about, at that time, $15 billion. A little more than around chump change, $15 billion back in 1948.
Today, that's a rounding error.
Yeah. So, but, our schools need this Marshall Plan. we have to build whole countries back then. Now it's just building our schools. And this is according to Richard Carranza, our favorite superintendent at New York City, Austin Butner in LA, and Janice Jackson, not to be confused with Janet Jackson, in Chicago. So according to their little editorial they wrote for the Washington Post, they say it's time to treat the dire situation facing public school students with the same federal mobilization we have come to expect for other national emergencies such as floods, wildfires, and hurricanes. A major coordinated nationwide effort, imagine a Marshall Plan for schools, is needed to return children to public schools quickly in the safest possible way.
How can you do that when you keep saying you're not going back to school? It's guys like Carranza and the whole crowd. You've got Marshall Mathers, right? You got the Marshall Plan. You got Janet Jackson. I'm nasty.
Stop.
I'm nasty.
Please stop. Janice Jackson. And we're done. Moving on, in another quote, they said, as the superintendents of the nation's 3 largest public school districts, New York, LA, and Chicago, every day we grapple with the challenges that worry not just the president-elect, Joe Biden, but also the students and families we serve. Our schools, like thousands more across the nation, need help from the federal government, and we need it now.
Hand out. Hey, at least when we were built, and the sad thing is how many people don't know what the Marshall Plan is. So after World War II, after we were attacked by the Japanese on Pearl Harbor, after we destroyed the western half of the Nazi war machine, we left Berlin and we left Tokyo in tatters. We bombed, literally, we bombed the crap out of those guys. They had it coming. They deserved every bit of it. Wish we could have given them more. But, you know, when you think about how in our history classes, our kids learn what a colonial, evil country America is, how horrible we are. Well, give me another example in the history of the world where this happened. Where after we defeated Japan and Germany, you're telling me Germany as the 51st state and Japan as the 52nd state wouldn't have been badass? Would it not have? I mean, we'd have cornered the car market, and we would have cornered the
Schnitzel? What are you trying?
And the schnitzel market.
The schnitzel market.
We would have got the schnitzel and the car market. But did we keep them? No. What did we do? Not only did we turn those countries back to their own people, we sent billions of dollars over there to rebuild what we had knocked down. Now here's the problem. Who is it that knocked down American public schools? American public school teachers. Who is it that waged war against math and science and English and literacy? It's you public schools. I love this. Before we give you a Marshall Plan, let's come in and decimate the crappy political, ideological, and incredibly unsuccessful way you attempt to destroy our kids through education. Let's take away those big fat salaries and retirement plans. Let's drive out the teachers who think the purpose of school is social justice. Let's replace, as we did in World War II, let's storm the beachheads at Normandy High School in Nebraska. Let's storm the beachheads and remove the non-educators who have taken over the public schools to feed them nothing more than Hitlerian and imperial Japanese propaganda about what this country is and is not. After we do that, after we land on your beaches, public school teachers, and we take back what you have pissed away, then we'll consider sending you Marshall money.
And of course, what they're doing is they're using this op-ed as it's because of coronavirus, and that's why our kids suck. They're saying that the fact is that many, if not most children, online and even hybrid education pales in comparison to what's possible in a classroom led by a great teacher. Too many children are falling behind, threatening not just their individual futures, but also America's global competitiveness. This is how dumb they are. They then decide, okay, we're going to put an example in, and they use LA. LA, they say, has almost 80% of their students living in poverty. That just didn't happen during Corona. That didn't just happen. Almost 82% are Latino or Black. D's and F's have increased this year by 15%. And the reading proficiency in elementary is down another 10%. It's not like they were coming in at 98%.
We did a story last year. 80% of Black males who graduate high school in Los Angeles are functionally illiterate. And so if only the last survey I saw from the NAEP scores, if only about 8% of Los Angeles high school kids can do math and read at the 8th grade level, how do you even find 15% to cut?
Exactly. Math. It's coming for math.
I mean, pretty soon you're getting to the point where what's 15% of 8?
And then you're like, oh God, what's
I mean,
like we're down to
you're
just
almost
nibbles.
at the point where percentages aren't even possible anymore.
Exactly. Now, here's what they want. They want, specifically, a federal relief package for schools that should cover the basic building blocks of a safe, healthy, and welcoming school environment so that educators and students can focus exclusively on their mission, high-quality teaching and learning.
Yeah.
Funds should be provided directly to public school districts for four essential programs: the cleaning and sanitizing of facilities, because that's going to help with the education of it, providing protective equipment, school-based coronavirus testing, and contact tracing to help reduce the risk for all in the school community.
Boy, that's going to make them read.
And then mental health support for students to address the significant trauma they're facing, and funding for in-person instruction next summer to help students recover from learning losses because of the pandemic. Now, you tie this into the Washington story that we just covered about how they want these medical centers. What are our schools becoming then if it's nothing more than just medical things to manipulate your body?
I simply repeat, before you can have the Marshall Plan to rebuild the schools, let us storm your beachheads. Let us send our bombers and our fighters into American public schools to destroy the enemy. And the enemy is you. You look in the mirror, public school system employees, and the enemy is you. I would be so pleased to have higher taxes to pay to rebuild the schools after they've been trashed. But there's all of this ideology, all this social justice. Oh man, Let's start recruiting people.
You know what? But
Uncle Sam wants you to take back the public school campus.
I'm going to go and talk history again. Sorry. So Marshall Plan, let's go back just a little bit more in time and talk about a man named Lincoln. Abraham, to be exact. Abraham Lincoln. Well, he's a real racist, according to San Francisco, so he must be destroyed, canceled, cleared out. No longer one of the, if not the greatest president in the history of this country because he was a racist. He has too much of this stained by racism life. That's what they're calling it. His life has been stained by racism. So he's going to be canceled. We should take his name off of school buildings. And you know what? He's not the only one. We're going to try and do this for his name and other names at 44 sites just in San Francisco alone. And we have a committee to do this. And it's being led by Jeremiah Jeffries, who's the chairman, and a first grade teacher.
Can't make this stuff up.
I love my elementary teachers, but...
And you know the funny thing is that there are probably about 24 schools in the San Francisco area who are named after Harvey Milk.
Oh, I'm sure there are.
Harvey Milk, the confessed predator. He was a pedophile who forcibly raped little children with his ideology, who forcibly raped and defended the rape of little children. Harvey Milk has now a Navy vessel named after him. He is named after dozens of schools. There's an award named after him. There's a big screen movie about him, all clothing the lies. And those schools in San Francisco will remain named after Harvey Milk. But Lincoln has to go.
And others. So Jeremiah Jeffries says that uprooting the problematic names and symbols that currently clutter buildings, streets throughout the city is a worthy endeavor. Only good can come from the public being reflective and intentional about the power of our words, names, and rhetoric within our public institutions.
Have you ever heard prettier nonsense gobbledygook words defending censorship?
Could he just go out onto the actual street and declutter those streets of the homeless, needles, feces all over? Let's start there, and then we can rename it after the fact. Now, critics have called...
Maybe the drug and feces-filled streets could be named Harvey Milk Way.
Maybe they will. Critics have called the effort to rename the 44 school sites a full third of the district schools. 44 is a full third of what they have.
Yep.
They're calling it amateur, citing the committee's justifications pulled from Wikipedia. Their reassoning, when they look at their research, the committee got together. We look at Wikipedia, we say, oh, racist. So he must be canceled. Now, and they're also saying, obviously, it's a waste of time because we have other things going on, like a pandemic, or the fact that Nancy Pelosi still represents your area. That's another one. But it's gotten support from some of the communities whose children wear the school sweatshirts that are emblazoned with these awful racist people. Now, you may want to know who else is included in this whole list of names. Well, according to a reporter for San Francisco Chronicle, she injected her opinion when she talked about the 44 school sites to be renamed, that Thomas Jefferson and James Monroe were slave owners, and Vasco Nunez Balboa was a murderous conquistador, and at least a few names on the list raised eyebrows, including El Dorado. literally translated to City of Gold, which, P.S., I taught my junior high kids about all that, and they were fascinated. Also, Dianne Feinstein, who landed on the list because as mayor in the 1980s, she replaced a vandalized Confederate flag in front of City Hall. They're already trying to cancel her in Congress, too, so she's getting attacked all over the place.
How long before the geniuses in California get rid of Corona, California?
Oh, of course.
You would think that would be obvious, right?
But perhaps the most controversial on the list was Lincoln. Honest Abe. The great emancipator. These are all separate sentences, by the way. His inclusion exemplifies the struggle in San Francisco and across the country to balance the good and the bad. In this case, the hero and the 19th century man with many faults.
So it's not there's no balance. They just canceled him.
They're canceling him.
There is no balance.
That's what's going on.
They canceled his. But.
Yes. Now they made notes here too that while Lincoln, whose grandfather was killed by a Native American, oversaw the hanging of 38 Native Americans, he also saved the lives of 265 others, and that's according to the Lincoln Scholar. So they're claiming that he's a racist because of Native American ties, too.
But okay, you keep pointing out the good and the bad, but you still cancel him.
Yeah, there you go.
But the bottom line is that look, I think Dianne Feinstein's an idiot that should never had a school named after her. If that's it, if that's the only thing it takes to get you removed, she is a complete radical leftist airhead. If because 40 years ago she replaced a Confederate flag that was stolen with another one, if that's all you got, that's pretty pathetic.
We got some history today, and now we're going to get some real education. Rembrandt, as you may have heard, was a Dutch draftsman, painter, and a printmaker, an innovative and prolific master in 3 media. He's generally considered one of the greatest visual artists in the history of art and the most important in Dutch art history. His contributions to art came in a period of great wealth and cultural achievement that historians like to call the Dutch Golden Age.
Now, that's Rembrandt Harmenszoon van Rijn to you. Born in 1606, died 1669. He's one of those few artists that when you think of the word art, immediately comes to mind. You say the word art, something like Da Vinci is going to come to your mind, Michelangelo, and Rembrandt's one of that triad of people you think of. But we go to this picture here. It's Christmas week here at the Dr. Duke Show, and we had a very interesting picture yesterday. This one I think is also interesting. Here is a beautiful little painting. It's one that we don't really think about much when we think of Rembrandt anymore. He has so many remarkable paintings that this one gets a little bit lost in the shuffle. This is called The Holy Family with a Curtain. And if you remember the one we saw yesterday, it was very Caravaggiste. It was a close-up of the Virgin Mother and Joseph and a couple of shepherds peering in down to the manger where Christ was. The baby himself was a source of incredible light that illuminated those faces, almost as if they were sitting before a campfire. Very intimate, very personal. Van Honthorst invited you to the very center of the mystery of the birth of Christ. Here, it's a family scene, right? Here, that very interestingly, Rembrandt has painted, it's not a real curtain hanging on a real rod. He painted a curtain and a rod over the painting, and you can see that somebody's just pulling the curtain back so you can have a very, very brief, fleeting glimpse into the life of Christ. And there the young Christ child perhaps just has been crying, as children are wont to do. And as the mother, the Virgin Mother, as she's concerned with her knitting or her housework, she actually takes a moment to pick up the crying Christ child to soothe it. Very intimate, but also notice the distance. If you think about the painting we looked at yesterday, you were right there in the scene. Notice how far removed you are from the Holy Family. And then there, you can't even barely see him. On the right side of the picture, right by the curtain, in the back, way in the back, illuminated, concealed in shadow, is Joseph, the father, the stepfather of the infant Jesus. And you can barely make him out. He's toiling away at his carpentry. So notice that in this particular Christian scene of the young Christ, notice how far away you are. You've got the picture frame, which isolates you, and then painted over the picture frame is the curtain, which isolates you, and then the Mother of God, you're going to have to take 4 or 5 paces into the room before you even get to her, and another 10 before you get to come across Joseph in the very back. I think what Rembrandt's trying to do here is to suggest that while the public sacrifice of that young baby, the human significance of the incarnation also needed to be balanced out by that other side of the family, their intimate, personal family relations. Kind of a beautiful picture for Christmas.
All right, before we go, just a reminder, the best way to keep up with our various shows here at Freedom Project is to follow us on Parler. So just take a few moments today and follow at Duke Pesta, at Katie, and at Freedom Project. And if you're a fan of this show, and of course you are, please consider a one-time tax-deductible donation this Christmas season to support our Patriot Club. And we're going to send you a festive red tumbler. It's just a little thank you. And also, it makes for a great Christmas gift. So, you know what? Donate a couple times if you'd like. All you have to do to sign up is visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us. Now we're going to wrap things up with the fun fact of the day. On the night of Abraham Lincoln's assassination, the bill to create the Secret Service, whose principal purpose basically is to protect the president, was actually on Lincoln's desk. Ooh. And Lincoln's bodyguard, John Parker, at the time of Lincoln was shot, was at the saloon. The same saloon where John Wilkes Booth, the shooter, was actually drinking right before he went and shot Lincoln.
Did you actually go?
I did, I know,
when you're
but
talking
it's
about,
just mind blown, but a little too close to home on that one. I understand.
We didn't need the graphic illustration.
You want to talk about graphic illustrations on this show? Who does graphic illustrations?
The cranial implosion. Now, what does the Lincoln Project mean now? It simply means anti-Trumpers. And that wraps it up for the show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, stay educated, my friends. And remember, Tiny Tim back in Victorian England, he actually used to solicit donations out of one of these beautiful tumblers, right? Please, sir, please.